The sun was just beginning to lower, spilling copper light across the desert floor when Dakota spotted the trail. His keen eyes had followed the faint disturbances in the dust for most of the day, the scattered prints of moccasins, the drag of something heavier, and the broken twigs that whispered of a struggle. He had been hunting alone when the cry reached him on the wind, faint but urgent. And though many would have dismissed it as a bird's call, he knew better. Someone was in danger. Dakota was young, barely past 20 summers, yet already his people looked to him with respect. He carried himself with the silent confidence of a seasoned warrior, though his heart was not hardened. It was this instinct, the unyielding pull to protect, that pushed him forward now. He quickened his pace, weaving through the mesquite and yucca until the sound of rough voices carried on the air. Crouching low, Dakota peered through the brush. There, near a dry wash, 3 men from a rival band had cornered a girl. She struggled against the rope that bound her wrists, her long black hair catching the evening light. Though dust streaked her face, her eyes burned with defiance. He recognized her instantly, a hive, daughter of one of the tribe's respected healers. His pulse surged. Capturing a healer's child was more than a cruel act. It was a declaration of contempt. If these men succeeded in taking her across the hills, the insult to Dakota's people would demand blood in return. Yet even beyond tribal duty, something in Ahiv's fierce struggle stirred him deeply. He had no time to plan. The men were preparing to move, one tightening the knot at her wrists, another keeping guard. Dakota drew a silent breath, fitted an arrow to his bow, and stepped into the open. Let her go. His voice rang out, sharp as flint. The men whirled in surprise. For a moment they hesitated, startled by the sudden appearance of a warrior alone. Then they laughed, mistaking his solitary stance for weakness. "Walk away, boy," the tallest sneered, pulling a knife from his belt. "She is ours now." Dakota's arrow did not waver. His heart pounded, but his gaze was steady. "Not while I draw breath." The standoff broke in a blur of movement. The knife wielder lunged, but Dakota loosed his arrow in the same heartbeat. The shaft struck true, grazing the man's arm and sending the blade clattering to the earth. Before the others could recover, Dakota charged, bow cast aside, tomahawk in hand. The fight was swift and brutal. Dust rose beneath stamping feet, fists struck flesh, and the sharp clang of stone against steel echoed in the wash. Though outnumbered, Dakota fought with the desperation of one who knows failure means another's ruin. He ducked a wild swing, drove his shoulder into an attacker's chest, and sent the man sprawling. Another rushed him with a club, but Dakota twisted aside and brought his tomahawk down in a swift arc. Disarming the foe at last, the rivals faltered. Bloodied and breathless, they realized this was no ordinary youth before them, but a warrior, unwilling to yield. With curses thrown over their shoulders, they fled into the growing dusk, leaving their prize behind. Silence settled, broken only by Ahiv's ragged breathing. Dakota turned to her, his chest heaving. For the first time since the fight began, he allowed himself to see her clearly. She stood proud despite her bindings, chin lifted, eyes meeting his without fear. He knelt and cut the rope at her wrists. "You are safe now," he said softly, though his voice carried the weight of all he had risked. A hive rubbed her freed hands, her gaze lingering on him. Gratitude shone in her eyes, but beneath it was something unspoken, something neither of them fully understood yet. The desert wind stirred between them, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Dakota felt the earth steady beneath his feet once more. But in his heart, a storm had begun. He had saved her because it was right, because honor demanded it, but as he looked at a hive, he sensed that this single act would bind their fates in ways he had not foreseen. Together they began the walk back. Toward the village, the shadows of evening lengthening around them. Dakota did not yet know that in saving her, he had set into motion a chain of events that would test not only his strength, but his very soul. The journey back to the village stretched beneath a sky painted with violet and gold. Dakota kept a steady pace, guiding Ahive along the familiar trails that wound through the desert hills. Neither spoke much at first. The weight of what had just passed still pressed heavily between them. Ahive's wrists bore faint red marks from the ropes, and though she walked without complaint, Dakota could see the weariness in her step. At last, as the glow of firelight flickered in the distance, Ahive broke the silence. "You should not have come alone," she said. Her voice was quiet, yet firm. Dakota glanced at her, his mouth curving into the faintest hint of a smile. "And leave you to them? That was never a choice." Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer, as though weighing the truth of his words. Then she turned her eyes forward again, saying nothing more. But the set of her shoulders softened, and Dakota felt a shift he could not name. By the time they reached the outskirts of the village, the word of their approach had already spread. A boy who had seen them from a distance ran ahead, calling out the news. "Ahive has returned. Dakota has brought her home." The people gathered quickly. Elders rose from their seats near the council fire. Mothers drew their children close, and warriors stepped forward to see for themselves. Relief swept through the crowd at the sight of Ahive unharmed, though many gasped at the marks upon her wrists. Ahive's mother rushed forward, her braids loose, eyes brimming with tears. She clasped her daughter in trembling arms, whispering words of thanks to the spirits for her safe return. Ahive leaned into her embrace, but after a moment she turned her gaze back toward Dakota, as if she could not let him slip from her sight just yet. Then came the voices of the elders. Chief Nahil, tall and gray-haired, lifted his staff and spoke with gravity. "Dakota, son of Genoa, you have done what few could. You faced the enemy with courage and brought back one of our own. For this, the people honor you." A cheer rose, low at first but building with pride. Warriors struck their spears against the ground, and the women let out sharp, ululating cries of joy. Dakota bowed his head, accepting the praise with humility, though his heart felt unsettled. Chief Nahil raised his hand for silence, and the crowd quieted. His next words fell like stones into still water. "But we are a people of custom. Our ways are not forgotten. When a man saves a woman from grave peril, the bond is sealed. He must take her as his wife to protect her honor and to preserve the balance of our people." A ripple passed through the gathering. Dakota felt the air tighten around him, every eye fixed upon him in Ahive. Ahive's mother gasped softly and drew her daughter closer. Ahive herself stiffened, her face shadowed with shock. She looked at Dakota, searching his expression as though hoping he might deny the tradition, break the words before they could bind her fate. Dakota's chest tightened. He had not thought beyond the rescue. His only desire had been to see Ahive safe, her spirit unbroken. Marriage had not been his intent, but now, before his people, the ancient custom wrapped around them like an unshakable net. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Some smiled, whispering that the union would be a blessing, a brave warrior and the healer's daughter. Others frowned, sensing the discomfort etched across Ahive's features. Chief Nahil's voice cut through once more. "The council will speak tomorrow, but know this tradition is not questioned. What is bound by blood and bravery cannot be undone." The crowd dispersed slowly, people whispering their thoughts as they returned to their homes. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to follow Dakota and Ahive wherever they walked. Ahive lingered at the edge of her family's dwelling, turning back to face him. Her voice trembled, though her eyes were steady. "You saved me, Dakota. For that I will always honor you. but I will not be given away like a prize won in battle." He met her gaze, struggling to find words. At last he said, "I did not fight for tradition. I fought for you." She held his eyes for a heartbeat longer, then turned and disappeared into the shelter of her family's lodge. Dakota stood alone in the gathering dusk, the voices of his people fading, the weight of custom pressing down on his shoulders. Night was still, but within him, questions roared. Had his bravery saved a hive, or had it bound them both in chains neither had chosen? The following morning dawned clear, the desert sky stretching wide and merciless above the village. Smoke from the council fire drifted upward in thin gray lines, carrying with it the scent of sage and cedar. Dakota sat at the edge of the gathering. Circle, his hands resting on his knees, his heart heavy. The whispers from the night before had not died. They had only grown louder, echoing in every corner of the camp. Children had repeated what they'd overheard from their parents. He must marry her. Women had spoken in hushed tones as they pounded corn. It is the way. And the warriors had nodded gravely, speaking of honor and custom. The tribe had already decided in their hearts. Dakota knew it. A hive, meanwhile, remained within her. Family's lodge. He had not seen her since the night before. He pictured her sitting beside her mother, the healer, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. Was she angry with him? Resentful? Or simply afraid of what was coming? He did not know, and the not knowing gnawed at him like hunger. The drumbeat summoned the people to council. One by one they gathered, men and women forming a circle around the fire. The elders entered last, their faces solemn, their movements slow but filled with authority. Chief Nahil stood in the center, his staff planted firmly in the earth. "Last night," the chief began, his voice carrying easily across the hush, "Dakota returned our daughter a hive to us. He fought bravely against many and brought her home with honor." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Some nodded toward Dakota, others glanced at a hive where she now stood near her mother. Her chin lifted proudly. Nahil continued, "But as I spoke before, there is more than gratitude to consider. Our customs are not made for one moment, but for generations. When a man saves a woman from dishonor, he must become her protector for life. This is our way. To turn from it is to invite chaos into the circle of our people." At these words, Ahib's mother lowered her head, silent. But a hive stepped forward, fire flashing in her eyes. "I owe my life to Dakota," she said clearly, her voice unshaken. "But I owe my heart to no one but myself. I was not asked if I wished to be bound. I was not given a choice." The circle shifted uneasily. It was rare for a young woman to speak so boldly before the elders. Some women looked at her with quiet admiration, others with fear. Dakota's chest tightened. Every word she spoke cut him, though he knew she did not mean to. Wound. She was right. He had not asked her. He had only acted as instinct demanded. Chief Nahil raised his hand. "A hive, your voice is strong, but tradition is stronger. We are bound by it as surely as the river is bound to its banks. Without it, we are nothing." All eyes turned to Dakota. His silence could no longer protect him. He rose slowly to his feet, feeling the weight of 100 gazes. "I did not fight to claim her," he said, his voice steady though his heart thundered. "I fought because it was right. If custom demands marriage, then I will honor it. But let all here know this was not my wish, nor was it hers." Gasps rippled through the people. Some frowned, whispering that he spoke dangerously close to defiance. Others watched him with newfound respect, for it took courage to question. Tradition before the council. Chief Nahil's expression did not change, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak with honesty, Dakota, but remember tradition is not a cage. It is a shield. To reject it is to leave both yourself and a hive exposed. The council will not allow such weakness. Tomorrow we will decide. The gathering broke apart slowly, leaving Dakota and a hive standing apart, though bound by invisible threads. She met his gaze across the distance, her expression unreadable. Was it anger? Gratitude? Or something more complicated still? As the people drifted back to their dwellings, Dakota remained by the fire, staring into the flames. The crackle of burning wood seemed to echo the storm inside him. He had faced enemies with weapons in hand and never faltered, yet now he found himself trembling at the thought of a battle he could not win. The battle between tradition and the heart. The next day, the council summoned Dakota at dawn. He had barely slept, his mind restless with thoughts of Ahiv's words, the weight of his people's eyes, and the uncertainty of what fate awaited them both. When he stepped into the council lodge, the air was thick with smoke from burning sage, meant to clear away ill spirits. Yet the heaviness in his chest did not lift. The elders sat in a semicircle, their lined faces stern but unreadable. Chief. Nahil leaned upon his staff, while beside him sat old Mother Hania, the wisest among them, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Dakota, Nahil began, you are young, yet you carry the spirit of a warrior. You have shown bravery and honor. But bravery alone is not enough to guide a people. Custom holds us together, stronger than sinew, stronger than blood. Do you understand this? I do, Dakota said, bowing his head. His voice carried no hesitation, though his heart did. Mother Hania spoke next, her tone softer but no less firm. The girl's honor is at stake. She was taken, her wrists bound, her cries heard by enemies. Though you returned her, the shadow of shame lingers. If she does not become your wife, tongues will wag. Some will say she was defiled, others will doubt her purity. Do you wish such poison to spread through our people? Dakota's jaw tightened. He thought of Ahiv's proud eyes, her fierce defiance when she spoke before the council. She deserved freedom, not suspicion. Yet Mother Henia's words pierced him with cruel logic. He had seen how quickly whispers could destroy a woman's standing in the tribe. I would protect her from that, he said at last. Then you must take her as wife, Nahil declared. His staff struck the ground with finality. The council sees no other path. Dakota bowed again, though inside his chest, his spirit thrashed like a caged eagle. Meanwhile, a hive sat with her mother in their lodge. The healer was quiet, grinding herbs with deliberate movements, though her eyes darted often toward her daughter. You are troubled, her mother said at last. I am trapped, a hive whispered. They speak of honor, of protection, as though I am a child with no will of my own. I do not doubt Dakota's courage, but must my life be tied to him because of one act, however noble? Her mother's hand stilled. Tradition does not ask. It binds. The people will not see your heart, a hive. They will see only the shadow of your capture and the man who saved you. Without marriage, their tongues will cut you sharper than any blade. A hive looked away, fighting back the heat in her eyes. And what of love? What of choosing a husband with my heart instead of by decree? Her mother's silence was answer enough, as the sun climbed higher. Dakota stepped out of the council lodge and found himself surrounded by murmurs. Warriors clapped his shoulder, congratulating him as though the marriage were already set. Mothers smiled knowingly, and young men looked at him with envy, but the weight of their approval felt heavier than scorn. He searched the crowd for a hive, but she did not appear. It was as if she had vanished into the shadows of the village. By evening, Dakota walked alone along the riverbank, seeking solace in the sound of rushing water. The words of the elders echoed in his ears. Honor, protection, marriage. They were right and yet wrong. He could not bring himself to think of a hive as a burden of duty. Every time he pictured her face, he saw not weakness needing protection, but fire and strength that demanded freedom. Still, the tribe had spoken. The council would not bend. And in the silence of the river's song, Dakota felt the truth settle over him like a shroud. If he chose to resist, he would stand not only against tradition, but against his entire people. The desert night closed, in stars sharp against the darkness. Dakota lifted his eyes to the heavens, searching for answers in the endless sky. None came, only the whisper of the wind, carrying with it the voices of his ancestors and the weight of choices yet to be made. The days after the council's judgment were restless ones. The village moved forward as if the marriage were already sealed. Women spoke of the garments to be sewn. Hunters joked that Dakota would soon be bound not to his bow, but to a wife's watchful eye. Everywhere he walked, people greeted him with nods of approval. Yet every word of praise landed on his shoulders like a stone. Dakota found no joy in it. At night, his dreams were filled with the clash of voices, elders urging obedience, ahivs, voice demanding freedom. By day, he wandered the riverbanks, as though the current might carry away the weight of his thoughts. It was on one such day that his friend Kahana found him. Kahana was older by a few years, broad-shouldered and quick to laugh, but his smile was absent now. "You wear your doubts like war paint," Kahana said, settling on a rock beside him. Dakota gave a weary sigh. "The people see honor, I feel." "Chains." Kahana studied him for a moment. "Do you wish to refuse?" Dakota's gaze dropped to the water. "My heart says one thing, my people another. To resist would shame me. And worse, it would bring dishonor to a hive." She would bear the whispers. Kahana leaned closer, lowering his voice. "There are whispers already. Some say you linger, too long in thought that you hesitate. Others mutter that perhaps the girl is not grateful. They twist her strength into insult, her defiance into arrogance." Dakota's chest tightened. "That is unjust." "It does not matter," Kahana said grimly. "Unjust words can still wound. If you reject the marriage, the wound will fester into division. You would not only shame her, you would divide the tribe." Dakota clenched his fists, torn between anger and despair. Must duty always silence the heart? Kahana placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes. That is the way of men who lead. But you must decide, brother, will you carry the weight of tradition or break beneath it?" Meanwhile, in her mother's lodge, a hive battled her own storm. The women of the village came daily, bringing baskets of cornmeal or small gifts as though congratulating her on good fortune. Each blessing felt like a chain laid across her shoulders. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a hive slipped away to the edge of the hills. There she found solace in the open air, away from eyes that measured her every movement. She whispered her thoughts into the wind, words she dared not speak aloud in the council circle. "I am not weak," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I will not be given as a prize, even to one as brave as Dakota. I will choose my path, or I will walk it alone." Yet even as she spoke, she remembered his face, the steadiness in his eyes when he had cut her bonds. He had not looked at her as though she were fragile. He had looked at her as though she were his equal in the fight. The thought unsettled her, for it made the path ahead more tangled. By the next morning, the tension between them had begun to show. Children noticed when a hive turned her gaze away as Dakota passed. Women whispered when she spoke curtly, when she refused to smile at his approach. The whispers grew like weeds in fertile soil. Dakota, hearing them, knew he could not stay silent forever. That night, beneath a sky lit with cold stars, he met with Kahana again. "I cannot bind her with chains of custom," Dakota said. "If she comes to me, It must be because her spirit wills it, not because the council decrees it. Kohana shook his head. Your words are brave but dangerous. The elders will not see the difference. They will see only defiance. And if you choose rebellion, you will stand alone. Dakota looked out across the darkened plain where the land stretched endless and unyielding. Then let me stand alone, he whispered. Better that than to chain another's heart. But deep inside he knew rebellion was never so simple. The tribe was not merely rules and elders, it was his blood, his people, his home. To fight against it would mean tearing apart the very fabric of who he was. And yet, in his heart, the fire of choice burned brighter than ever. The decision of the council was final. Preparations for the wedding began as the sun rose each morning, and by midday the village was alive with the sounds of weaving, grinding, and singing. Women spun bright threads to adorn Ahiv's dress. Hunters set aside hides for Dakota's ceremonial robe, and children ran laughing, too young to understand the weight pressing down upon the bride and groom. To the people, it was cause for celebration. To Dakota and Ahiv, it was a slow tightening of the cord that bound them both. Ahiv sat with her mother and the other women, sewing the final seams of the wedding garments. Her fingers moved quickly, but her mind wandered. She listened to the women's chatter praise for Dakota's bravery, whispers of how strong their children would be, and felt her chest tighten. They spoke as though her heart were not her own, as though her future had already been sewn into the fabric of her dress. That night, she left the half-finished garment behind and walked into the cool desert air. The stars stretched endlessly above, and the moon bathed the land in pale silver. At the edge of the river, she found Dakota sitting alone, his reflection broken upon the rippling water. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she stepped forward. Do you hide here from your own wedding? Dakota turned, surprise flickering across his face. Then a rueful smile. Perhaps. Do you come to escape it too? Ahiv lowered herself beside him, her dress brushing against the sand. They sat in silence, the sound of the water filling the space between them. At last, she spoke. Do you wish this marriage? Dakota's gaze remained fixed on the river. I wish for your safety, your honor. But if you ask whether, my heart chose this path, no. It was chosen for us both. Her breath caught, though she had expected nothing different. Then why do you not refuse? He turned to her then, eyes dark with the fire of conviction. Because to refuse would leave you vulnerable. The people would question you, doubt you. Every whisper would cut you deeper than a blade. I would not see you bear that alone. Ahiv's heart stirred, though she fought to still it. His words were not of possession, but of protection, not the protection of a fragile thing, but of an equal whose strength deserved to remain untarnished. You speak as though my spirit is weaker than theirs, she said softly. No, Dakota answered firmly. I speak as though your spirit is stronger, and for that very reason they would try to break it. For the first time since the decree, Ahiv felt her anger ease. She studied him in the silver light, the way his jaw tightened, the quiet determination etched in his face. Perhaps he was as trapped as she was, but within his chains, he still fought to give her space to breathe. In the days that followed, Dakota and Ahiv began to spend more time together, not because they were told to, but because something in each sought the other's company. He showed her where the river curved into hidden pools where the fish ran thick. She taught him the names of herbs her mother had passed down, their leaves sharp with healing or poison depending on the hand that used them. Laughter crept into their conversations, tentative at first, then easier. Though the wedding loomed ever closer, they found moments of lightness. Like small fires in the dark, still, whispers persisted. Women spoke of how the girl softened, how perhaps she had finally accepted her fate. Men boasted that Dakota had bent. The proud Ahive to tradition. Neither Dakota nor Ahive corrected them. Their bond was not for others to interpret, it was theirs. Fragile, forming, an unspoken dot on the night before the ceremony, the village gathered to prepare the grounds. Fires burned bright, drums echoed into the hills, and the air thrummed with anticipation. Yet Dakota and Ahive stood apart, watching from the shadows. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "they will bind us." She met his gaze steady and calm. "Then let it be binding only if we choose it." In that moment, with the firelight flickering across their faces, the weight of duty gave way to something unexpected, the first spark of choice. The night before the wedding, the village square pulsed with life. Fires blazed high, throwing sparks into the sky. Drums beat in steady rhythm, and the people sang in anticipation of the union that, to them, promised harmony and strength. Yet beneath the song and smoke, unease coiled. Not all shared in the celebration. Takoda stood at the edge of the gathering, his eyes on Ahive. She moved gracefully among the women, her head held high despite the storm within her. He admired her strength, even as his chest tightened with the knowledge that tomorrow she would be bound to him, not by her choosing, but by custom's decree. The drums fell silent suddenly, replaced by the low murmur of voices as a figure stepped forward from the crowd. Nakai, son of a respected warrior, tall and broad, with a sharpness in his eyes that often masked his envy, raised his hand for silence. "I speak," Nakai declared, his voice carrying like a strike of thunder. "This marriage is not yet done. Tradition binds, yes, but tradition also honors rightful claim. I, too, sought Ahive's hand before. My father spoke with her mother. And now, because Dakota happened upon her misfortune, the prize is given to him?" The crowd rippled with gasps and whispers. All eyes turned to the council fire, where Chief Nahil rose slowly, his staff striking the ground for order. "Nakai, your words are bold, but the council has spoken. Dakota saved the girl from shame and peril. By our law, the right is his." Nakai's gaze flicked to Dakota, sharp with challenge. "A warrior proves his worth not only by a single act of rescue. Let him face me before the people. Let us see who truly deserves her." The murmur swelled into a roar. The people loved contest, loved the testing of strength and spirit. Some cheered for Nakai, others for Dakota. Ahive, standing near her mother, stiffened, her jaw set in anger. Dakota stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He had no desire. For this fight, Ahive was not a prize to be won, but to refuse would mean weakness, and worse, shame upon her name. He bowed his head once, then lifted it high. "I accept. But let it be known, this challenge is not for possession. It is for honor, and it is for her to witness." The circle widened. Torches flared brighter. Nakai stripped off his robe, revealing the muscles of a seasoned fighter. Dakota stood calm, tomahawk in hand, his breath steady, his spirit grounded in silence. The clash came swift and fierce. Nakai attacked with brute strength, each strike of his club resounding like thunder. Dakota met him with agility, dodging, parrying, his tomahawk flashing in the firelight. The crowd shouted with every blow, every dodge, the tension thick enough to choke. Ahive's eyes never left Dakota. She saw in him not a man seeking to claim her, but one who fought with restraint measured, controlled. His strikes were not meant to destroy, but to defend, to show the people his strength without losing himself to anger. At last, Nakai overextended, lunging wildly. Dakota stepped aside, sweeping his leg beneath Nakai's and sending him crashing to the ground. In one swift motion, he pressed the edge of his tomahawk to Nakai's throat. Silence fell. Only the crackle of fire broke the stillness. Dakota held the weapon there for a heartbeat, then lowered it. He stepped back, offering Nakai his hand to rise. Nakai, face flushed with fury and humiliation, slapped it away and stormed from the circle. Chief Nahil's voice rang out. It is settled. Takoda has proven his honor. The marriage will proceed at dawn. Cheers erupted, though not from all. Some faces showed doubt, others excitement. But Ahiv's face alone mattered to Takoda. She met his eyes, and in her gaze he saw not defeat nor resentment, but the first glimmer of something new. Respect. As the fires burned deep into the night, Takoda knew the battle was won. Yet the greater challenge remained, not to win a hive by custom or combat, but to win her heart by choice. The dawn of the wedding day arrived with the sky streaked in crimson and gold. Smoke rose from the cook fires, carrying the scent of roasted maize and venison. Women moved swiftly, braiding garlands of desert flowers, while men decorated the lodge poles with feathers and paint. The village pulsed with energy, as though the earth itself prepared for the binding of two lives. Takoda stood apart from the bustle, dressed in ceremonial robes of tan buckskin, his chest painted with symbols of strength and protection. His hands were steady, but his spirit churned. He had faced enemies, storms, and the weight of tradition itself, but nothing unsettled him like the thought of binding a hive. Without knowing her true will, a hive emerged from her family's lodge draped in the wedding dress the women had labored. Over its seams embroidered with bright threads of red and blue. Her dark hair flowed loose, crowned with a band of eagle feathers. The people gasped in admiration, yet her eyes were not fixed on them. She walked with measured steps, gaze locked on Takoda, as though the world around them had dissolved. Council gathered by the central fire. Chief Nahil raised his staff, his voice deep and commanding. Today we bind Takoda and a hive, warrior and healer's daughter, in the sacred circle of marriage. He saved her life, and by our ways she is his. So it has always been, so it shall remain. The crowd murmured approval, but Takoda's jaw tightened. He glanced at a hive. She stood tall, her chin lifted, but in her eyes burned a question. Will you accept this, or will you let me choose? When the chief motioned for Takoda to speak his vows, he stepped forward slowly, his voice carrying across the circle. I honor our customs, he began, for they hold us together as a people. But I cannot take a hive as my wife because tradition demands it. To bind her without her spirit's consent would dishonor her and dishonor me. I saved her life, but that does not give me the right to claim it. A hush fell over the crowd. Mothers gasped, warriors frowned, and the elders exchanged uneasy glances. Never before had a man stood before the council and defied the ritual words. Takoda turned to a hive, his voice softening. If you walk beside me, let it be because your heart wills it, not because the council commands it. The silence was broken by Ahiv's clear, unwavering voice. I choose. She stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. Not because you saved me. Not because the council decrees it. I choose because in you I see honor, and in your heart I see freedom. If we are bound, it will be by our choice, not by chains. The people stirred, shocked and uncertain. Some whispered that the old ways were being challenged, others that a new strength was being born before their eyes. Nahil lifted his staff, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, the circle waited, the fate of tradition itself trembling. In the balance, at last, the chief spoke. Custom is the river that guides us. But even rivers change their course in time. Today, the binding shall be honored not as command, but as choice freely made. The crowd erupted, some with cheers, others with murmurs of doubt. But the voices mattered little to Takoda and a hive. Before the fire, before their people, they clasped hands. The warmth of her fingers in his was stronger than any decree, stronger than any law. Drums began to beat again, slow and steady. echoing through the hills. The people sang, though the song carried a new note, a shift in the air honor reshaped by choice dot as the sun rose high and bathed the desert in gold. Dakota and a hive stood together, no longer bound by tradition alone. They were bound by respect, by trust, and by the promise of a love born not from duty, but from freedom.